So it's not rehashed this time, and it's different, but does that automatically make it a masterpiece?
Those were up, and they did.
More smarts, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I am here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for a new release that came out around like a week and a half ago. I didn't see this till like the day, like last Wednesday. So that's why this review is a little late, and plus I was busy getting ready for Easter and all that, and I didn't really have time to really do this one right away. But I finally did. And and plus, like, I was originally going to see it the weekend, but then I got invited to a Canucks game, so I decided to just go to that instead. In case this ended up not being that great. So, then I saw Wednesday. Did have something to do Wednesday. And this release is going to be for the fifth installment of this franchise. The sequel to the film that came out in 2021 that revived the franchise. Saved it from a massive train wreck that happened years before it. And that film is going to be for the weekend after last weekend's Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And not directed by Jason Reitman. It's directed by Gil Kenan this time. aka the director of that shitty Poltergeist remake from 2015. That really sucks ass. But we'll get to that stuff later. What's the plot of this? Well, this time the Spengler family have left Somersville, and they're now going back to where it all started, the New York City firehouse. And they team up with the original Ghostbusters, because the original Ghostbusters have now developed a top-secret research lab to take busting ghosts to the next level. Then the discovery of an ancient artifact unleashes a new evil force. That unleashes a new ice age. So the Ghostbusters, new and old, have to now join forces to protect their home and save the world from a second ice age. How was this movie made? Well, following the considered success of Afterlife, Sony announced this movie in April 2022, and Reitman was originally going to return as director. And then, of course, then Gil Kenan, the executive producer and co-writer, took over as a director that December of the same year. But the latter stayed on as a co-writer and co-producer. Then the cast from Afterlife was going to be all reprising their roles. And some new cast members will be joining the force, including Kumail Nanjiani, Patton Oswalt, and Lennon Acaster, March 2023. Then principal photography commenced that same month and it wrapped in June 2023. And of course, the film score is going to be composed by Dario Marasali and replacing Rob Simonson. And also, it was going to be the first film of the franchise to be released following the death of Ivan Reitman, the original director of the series, because eventually even he would later pass on, much like Harold Ramis did. And also, he possibly received credit as producer with his son and Jason Blumenfield. And of course, much like how Afterlife was dedicated to Harold Ramis' memory, this film was dedicated to Ivan Reitman's memory. And it celebrates the 40th anniversary of the very first film that started it all. So after this movie was completed, shot, and marketed, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire would premiere at the AMC 13 Theater at Lincoln Square in New York City, March 14th, 2024, then got released in theaters the week after on March 22nd. And of course, now, the film received mixed reviews from critics, though much lower than Ghostbusters 2, and some shockingly, the weirdest part, much lower reviews than the trash that doesn't exist. And it's grossed over 108 million worldwide so far. And honestly, this is not really that bankable of a franchise. So it's not surprising. Now, as for my reaction, well, this was another movie I went to see for some people's own benefits because they were Ghostbusters retired. And to be honest, like when I saw the trailer, the title for this seemed stupid, but it did look a little refreshing that they weren't going to rehash the first film again. Because while I did love Afterlife, or liked Afterlife, a lot of it rehashed the first one a lot of times for fan service, and that annoyed me quite a bit. Like, I did not like they rehashed Gozer. Instead of trying to come up with a new thread, I just felt using Gozer again was lazy. It's just so they could get the movie done, because they didn't have time to come up with new threats. So yeah, that was my biggest problem with Afterlife. They just kind of redid the first one again with the finale. And a lot of other elements from the first film, and yeah, they didn't really try to make a new threat. Like, even Ghostbusters 2, as much as I'm not a fan of Ghostbusters 2, even that movie has a new threat. I can admit that. So, eventually I just went to see the film, and I will say this. Now, it's not as good as Afterlife, but I don't think this movie's as bad as people are making this movie out to be. I don't think this is the worst Ghostbusters movie ever made. I think we all know what really deserves that title. It's definitely not this or Ghostbusters 2. It's something else we never talk about. Don't bring it up in the live chats either, please. Any mention of that infamous one will make me pissed off. Never talk of that movie. Please. Let's talk about the actual version we want or want to tolerate. At best. Yeah, this movie wasn't not as bad as I was fearing it was going to be, but I wouldn't really say it was that great. Like Ghostbusters Afterlife, we all know is the family emotional drama, and then we have Frozen Empire. It's the kind of like the tone of a Saturday cartoon, like the tone of the cartoon series, like Extreme Ghostbusters, the Real Ghostbusters. I did have some fun with this one and enjoyed it quite thoroughly. I wouldn't say I loved it. It doesn't really reach some of the good stuff that Afterlife had. It's not as really strong or emotional of a film. That being said, though, it's definitely, thankfully, much more closer in tone to the original movies. Has a lot of creativity in its visuals, its storytelling, and the gadgetry to overcome its crowded cast and occasional obvious wink to the original classic. If Afterlife, I consider Ghostbusters Afterlife to be Force Awakens actually done better. I guess you could say maybe Frozen Empire's Last Jedi done more tolerable and less insulting and slightly more respectful to the OG leads. This movie was thankfully not as bad as The Last Jedi. It was not as bad as Scream 6. I think those are worse than this movie. I would watch Frozen Empire over both those films any day of my life. Hell, this movie's not as bad as Matrix Pisserections, that's for sure. It's certainly not as bad as, what else could I think? It's certainly not as bad as Indiana Jones and the Diarrhea of Disney. Yeah, I'd watch this over a gazillion much more insulting sequels. This was at least bearable. I wouldn't say it was, good, but I would say it's bearable. Decent time waste. If this gets a third entry, hopefully that ends up being what Fall of Shitwalker Fall of Shitwalker done slightly more tolerable and no fuck-ups to any happy endings, but with the way this movie's box office is going, I wouldn't be too surprised if maybe they don't do a sequel to this. To be fair, Gil Keenan, despite directing that shitty Poltergeist remake that none of us liked, yeah, that movie, he didn't do too bad. You can tell the direction was done by someone who at least seems like actually feels more like a Ghostbusters fan than Paul Feig. And this was this was not a rehash like Ghostbusters 2 and Ghostbusters Afterlife were. And they tried to do a new, kind of a newer storyline for once. And did a new foe and a new threat here. There was then they didn't reuse Vigo from the second movie again here. Afterlife used Gozer again. They actually did someone new for a change. Now that was nice. Frozen Empire. Yeah. Frozen Empire, like, gives fans something more along the lines of what they wanted from a long-belated sequel, like new ghosts and new gadgets even. There were some new gadgets I liked seeing here. A lot more Dan Aykroyd this time, and improved moments from the rest of the OG cast, and some fun Murray moments despite the limited screen time he has. Yeah, like, after we were in a fictional town called Summersville in Afterlife, we started off there, we took a break from New York in that one. This time, we're now back in the actual location of the Ghostbusters films. We're back in New York City. As it should be, like, because Ghostbusters have to always take place in New York City, guys. Well, if you're going to keep making more of these Ghostbusters films, you got to go back to New York City. It was nice to have a little break from New York, but we got to go back to where the Ghostbusters really belong. Because, like, Afterlife ended with it, Ghostbusters taking the Ecto-1 back to New York. Yeah, we pretty much went back to New York now. And now that the Spengler family has made peace with Egon's death, and Egon can now be in peace, let's go back to New York now. Right here. And this time we get a bit more of a proper Ghostbusters film here. Now that we're back in the original location, like, Frozen Empire, like, navigates the delicate balance between going to nostalgic fans and capturing this younger audience with a few modern twists. Like, the cast do deliver stand-up performances, they give some fresh energy in the franchise. Like, James Acaster's addition does add a delightful dynamic to the team, and has some comedic prowess alongside the new ghosts in the season of Ghostbusters. But, of course, though, like, some were expecting, like, where's Rick Moranis' character? I want Rick Moranis back. Like, yeah, like, well, to be fair, guys, as much as some of us would like to see Rick Moranis' character again, Rick Moranis, guys, he's not into Hollywood that much. He retired from Hollywood. He would rather, most of the time, he prefers family first. Especially Hollywood today, I definitely don't blame him. So yeah, he's not really into Hollywood anymore. So if you're expecting Rick Moranis' character to come back in these new movies, it's not going to happen, guys. Don't count on that happening. Yeah, like, now, like, although, like, with the film's pacing, like, while the first film's pacing and Afterlife's pacing felt more smooth, the film's pacing here does kind of feel a little bit sluggish. They do take a bit more time to set up the plot and introduce some new characters to this movie. But as the story unfolds, it does gain some momentum, and we get a climax that pays off to the slow build-up. And you have, like, there's a good mix of humor, a good mix of action, and some supernatural elements to get some viewers engaged, and you get a roller coaster ride of emotions. And, like, so yeah, like, how the movie starts off, like, you get a little bit of a refreshed memory of what happened in Afterlife right here. The OD of Afterlife, like, happened. Like, they've made peace with Egon's death. Like, the new Ghostbusters and OG Ghostbusters defeated Gozer again in Summersville. Then, like, the old Ghostbusters were back. They reclaimed the Ecto-1. It went back to the New York firehouse, back to New York where it belongs. So we're now, like, and now we see, like, the whole Spengler family again. Yeah, like, Callie Spengler. Gary's, like, we all know Gary, this is now her new boyfriend, as they first met and fell in love in Afterlife. And, of course, and then Kelly's children, Trevor and Phoebe, like, and, of course, like, even their new friends they made in Afterlife, Lucky and Podcast, they've, like, moved out of Summersville. They're now living in New York City because, like, Winston and Ray have reestablished the Ghostbusters after the events in Summersville. They capture a ghost in Hell's Kitchen. Of course, like, as that, but unfortunately, there's some damage happens, and, of course, during the whole pursuit, because they're pursuing the ghost in the Ecto-1, and also they're also back in New York because they wanted to carry on Egon's legacy. And unfortunately, guess who's the mayor? Yep, the one who's decides to, like, is now appointing the Ghostbusters. Yeah, it's the city's new mayor and a longtime enemy of the Ghostbusters since the first film. Dickless himself, Walter Peck. Yep, Walter Peck is back in this movie, guys, and that's something I was not happy to see. No, not because of the actor, like, those kind of the thing is that one, this was the role that got almost ruined William's life, because some toxic fans thought he was Walter Peck in real life, and basically they bullied him for it, and this role almost damaged the actor's life, so it made sense for him not to come back in Ghostbusters 2, because he clearly didn't want to be associated with this character for a while. He did come back in the video game, though, but can you really blame him for not coming back in Ghostbusters 2, to be honest? Well, to be fair, though he was I will admit he was brave to come back for this movie. I will admit that. He was definitely brave to come back for the role eventually. But yeah, another problem is that I just don't like Walter Peck as a character. Nobody does. No, I'm not one of the toxic fans that thought William was the real life version of him. No, I'm not. Yeah, this is the guy that caused all the problems of the first film, shutting down the Ghostbusters grid, that released all the ghosts in New York, and pretty much was the reason Gozer is able to possess Dana and Lewis, turn them into dogs, and almost destroy New York with Mr. Stay Puft. Yeah, and somehow this guy's not arrested, and he's now the new mayor. I don't know. No. I don't buy that idea. I don't agree with that idea. This guy's reputation, Walter Peck's reputation, should have been long ruined after everything that happened in the first film. Right there. Yeah, he's become the new mayor somehow. We never know how he became the new mayor. They don't explain that. And of course, he decides that because apparently Phoebe's a minor, decides that pretty much has Callie bench Phoebe from further field work until she's an adult. Yeah. And so Callie agrees to this just to appease him. And of course, Phoebe is reasonably upset at this, because now apparently Phoebe's been attempting to deal with her emotions, though, in the next scene by plays chess in a park, and then she finds a new ghost who's named Melody. Apparently Melody was a person who died alongside her family in a fire when she was 16. And we do see this character throughout the film. And then, of course, we find out, unfortunately, Podcast is back. And honestly, guys, however, I like that with Podcast because I did not like Podcast in Afterlife, guys. I like that Podcast was not in this movie that much. And it was in this movie, slightly less. So that was definitely refreshing here. But honestly, though, I did like some of the scenes him and Ray had together. And Ray and Podcast are now, working together for this little podcast series they're doing, and they've been collecting various cursed objects for examination, and they get visited by Kumail's character Nadim Razmadi. And I gotta tell you guys, of the new characters in this movie, I think he was easily the funniest. This guy stole the show in every scene he was in. You could tell he really enjoyed the role. I definitely loved his performance in this film. And he sells them an orb that apparently comes from his late grandmother's possession back in 1904, because then firefighters discovered her clutching it in a gentleman's club, and then the Manhattan Society found some thirsty people that froze to death from it. And the strange thing is that it happened in the month of July, not the winter. So Ray tests it to levels, and the orb then ends up unleashing a psychic change that pretty much damages the firehouse's ecto-containment unit. And it's dangerously near capacity from all the ghosts that are in it. Then Winston takes the orb for further examination at a new privately run paranormal research center, where his associate named Dr. Lars had been attempting work at harnessing spiritual energy from the ghosts in the unit, but he's unable to extract anything from the orb. So yeah, I really we got to see a little more Ghostbusters equipment. We see a new testing facility. That's something we never saw before. Usually in the past few films, the first film and Ghostbusters 2, they tested their equipment inside their own little firehouse. Now we actually see a little training center warehouse where they're testing out all their equipment. So I like that we actually got to see that. We actually get to see some new things to the Ghostbusters. A bit more equipment, a bit more gadgets, a bit more testing out, and a bit more weapons for them. In a little factory area right there. Now that's a great idea to add to the series. And out of the new cast members who do get enough of the new characters, McKenna Grace does remain a great lead, and her growing relationship with Gary is was actually a pretty decent time at moments, and even though it wasn't really developed all that well, although Kumail Nanjiani, it's hard to pronounce his name, but definitely was, like I mentioned, was definitely the best part of the movie here, and definitely the main source of humor for the newbies. And also, you can tell, And when it comes to like Ray Stantz, this one, like after a little bit, the little out character moments he had in Afterlife, like he, like this one actually felt like the Ray Stantz we know this time in this movie. I really liked it. Went back to the Ray Stantz we know here. Like you could tell Dan Aykroyd really liked returning to this character, and the enthusiasm he brings is really great. It's like this is actually this one, like this is actually the Ray that felt characteristic, the Ray we all know in the first two movies. And I like that version of him was back. And I also did love the scenes like Dan Aykroyd and McKenna Grace had together here. You're here a lot. Like there's a lot going on in this film. Yeah, there's a lot of characters coming and going. It does kind of feel like at times they're like throwing everything at you, hoping something will stick. But honestly, it made for a movie that really just wasn't really boring here. Even though, and sometimes though, not all the jokes really worked. There were plenty of gags in the movie though, but sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. Like this brings back, like as you all know, because this is both the OG and the newbies teaming up again. This brings back characters from Afterlife. Even get a few new characters to the story, and you also get the OGs back. They're in a little more, like, it's usually, although reasonably Egon's not back, but Ray and Winston do get more scenes. Venkman is back, but he gets like 53 minutes of screen time, but he's back. And even he feels like his characteristic self, with the limited stuff he works with. In a true Hollywood fashion, everybody's like back in this one. Yeah, even John Rothman's back, even William Arthurton's back, like the library's even back in one part, and yeah. And in the library part, like Ray mentions like he's not, they know personally, but apparently the library does not allow him there. Yeah, and I like the way that Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson's characters are used in the film. Like it's nicely done. Nicely done, and their characters are still treated with respect here. It's not like a lot of other sequels where most of the characters get treated like shit, or the OG characters for new sequels today. It's not like Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, where in that movie, Indiana Jones teamed up with his goddaughter. His daughter's like, you're old as shit, I'm not listening to you the whole time. No, it's not that at all. It's not that. Or it's not some digitally de-aged Indiana Jones. That sounds like he's 80 years old. Right there, like you can tell it's still the 80 years old Harrison Ford today, with the de-aging that looks like his younger self, and even though you can literally tell that he didn't even do a good job trying to hide his voice at all. And and it's not directed by a guy who acts like a bitch on Twitter, disrespects people like John Williams or Harrison Ford. No, not this year. Like these new films at least are done by people that actually seem like they give a shit. I can admit that. Like the special effects are definitely not bad for a film from today. The movie is loaded for them, and they were not horribly distracting. But after more of the orb right here, Trevor Pinfield and Lucky decide to learn more about the orb, so they visit Nadim for answers. Then they find out that the orb was contained in this hidden brace line chamber, and discover the orb got contained in this hidden brace line chamber built by the grandmother. And while our other OG character, Peter Venkman, when he enters this scene, like he uncovers that Nadim himself has apparently cryokinetic powers. Then Ray, Phoebe, and Podcast go to that library that from the first film, and we get a little reference to the library ghost that Ray Stantz remembers and he's spooked by from the first film, that first ghost encounter. Nice to see the library ghost back, and they still haven't caught that library ghost back yet. It's still in the library. So they visit a researcher, and that's Patton Oswalt's character, who's Dr. Hubert, for background on the orb. Then Hubert literally reveals the orb was designed to imprison this demonic god named Garaka, our antagonist of the film. Garaka had tried to conquer the world through this army of ghosts. He fed on negative emotions to lower temperatures to absolute zero. And then some sorcerers called the Fire Masters utilized his weakness of fire and brass. Then Nadim's grandmother, the descendant of the group, was apparently forced to recapture him when the Manhattan's Adventurous Society freed him. Then the trio find this ghost that's trying to steal records of the club's ritual. And then, of course, when they're trying to catch this ghost, sadly, it causes some more property damage. Then the police arrive. And then the three are pretty much sent to the police station. And then Peck enters again. And he pretty much shuts down the Ghostbusters. But Phoebe does not want to comply with this at all. So she pretty much gives Peck attitude. to it. So this gets Phoebe arrested because she didn't want to comply with Peck reasonably. Like, why would anybody comply with Walter Peck? And once again, how is this guy not ruined? Yeah, then of course, though, after that, though, Winston also chastises Ray for getting both Phoebe and Podcast in trouble. And although in the scene where, like, Phoebe insults Walter Peck, like, you could tell by Ray's reaction that even he enjoyed seeing that happen, even though this does get Phoebe in even more trouble. Because you could tell, like, Ray definitely remembers his past encounter with Walter Peck. It's right there. And yeah, so, like, then after, like, Gary and Callie bail Phoebe out, and some more family drama happens. But the family drama is not as heavy as it was in Afterlife. Here, like, it's slightly there, but it's not as overly heavy here. Like, when it comes to, like, the casting of Hubert, I think I will admit, Patton Oswalt, I just felt was kind of unnecessary. Like, as I feel like I kind of wished it was, like, Ray being the fun of the knowledge, and like, Winston right here in the movie, he's like the money behind the ongoing business, and that's great. Like, he gets to kind of help manage the account of the whole business to keep the Ghostbusters business going. And the introduction of James Aguster, like, is definitely nice for this franchise here. His character was not too bad. And if this is indeed a second act of a new trilogy, you could kind of forgive the exposition. Like, if the next film does happen, if this movie performs well, which it probably may not, especially with Godzilla X Kong out, and soon Monkey Man will be out. There's some very minor nods to original members as well. Like hopefully, like, you could get supported by some new cast members as well, even more for the next one. And some editing choices, yeah, I mentioned, like, some of the editing is choppy, but I've seen some much worse editing. The attention to details is also incredible. Yeah, like, I also like, there's not as much family drama on here. They kind of go back to the comedy tone and don't go overly serious with this one. And the OG characters, like, Ray and Winston, get way more to do. Ray feels like his normal self again. That's an upgrade from the uncharacteristic version of himself in Afterlife. And also, this is going to be a bit of a spoiler, guys, but do any of the original Ghostbusters die? Nope. None of them. None of the remaining 3 die. None of them. So don't worry about that part. For those who are worried of any of the original 3 remaining members dying, that does not happen here. We even, we also get new features, new equipment, a training testing area. So I like that we got some new things in here, like just that stuff we never saw before. And the main villain, Garaka, he's definitely a terrific villain, and I like they actually made a pretty dark threat to the series. But with the new characters, I'm still a bit mixed on them. Like, Phoebe was still the best in the new characters, no doubt. But as for the rest of the newbies, Trevor in this movie, he barely had much to do with Ghostbusters Afterlife. And if you thought that was a problem, guess what, guys? In this movie, he hardly gets a single thing to do in this film more. Gets even less things to do here. And honestly, like, he just felt unneeded to Girls and Empire. And if you just took Trevor out of the film, you'd miss literally nothing. If you took him out of this movie, you wouldn't really miss a thing because he basically does nothing in this movie. In Afterlife, like, he just was there to just drive the Ecto 1. And here, like, just barely has any scenes. Except, yeah. Then Podcast, was not a fan of Podcast or Afterlife. He's not in this one as much, and his comedy's toned down here. Thank goodness for that. And Callie is, like, now Callie, she's a bit improved here, but there's times when she still felt like her bitchy self. And Gary was not bad, but honestly, I don't feel like Gary was developed all that much. Like, I feel like they could have developed Gary a lot more here, because, like, and just give him some better developments. And, like, Lucky was also not in this one as much, thankfully. Like, this, whatever. I mean, so yeah. Phoebe's, like, upset about the Ghostbusters being shut down, and basically being reprimanded by her parents over disrespecting Walter Peck. So she runs away from home. Then she finds Melody again, and she takes Melody to Winston's research center to use the lab's experimental extraction equipment, then projects herself as a ghost for 2 minutes so that she and Melody can physically interact. But her friend then reveals that apparently she had been secretly working with Garaka the whole time, and was going to be freeing him in exchange for a passage to the afterlife. So Phoebe is then forced to recite the ritual chant, and that causes Garaka to become free. And then Garaka's now free, and he freezes the whole city. And he also seeks to free the ghosts in the containment unit as well again. So the Ghostbusters then gather to defend their headquarters before Walter Peck can come shut it down the next day. And then Nadim joins them, and he's equipped his grandmother's brace armor, and he attempts to master his psychokinetic powers. Despite the best efforts they have, Garaka successfully frees the ghosts. Then Phoebe seeks to literally overcome his power, reconfigures her proton pack with a brace-like alloy, and strengthens its proton stream. But Garaka sadly overpowers her too. This is kind of where the finale happens, and actually the finale was actually pretty terrific. They could have rehashed Ghostbusters 2's finale again if they badly wanted, and it would just be lazy again. No. They actually choose not to do that here. And that actually felt like a great payoff. They do a different finale for once. After, the okay finale from Ghostbusters Afterlife, now, while it was definitely nice seeing... It was definitely a very nice theater experience seeing the OG show up, and when after that scene in Afterlife happened, the theater felt like a football stadium. But yeah, but it probably would have been better if it was actually a new villain they had and not just the villain from the first one again. Here, they don't redo the whole final battle of Ghostbusters 2 here. They actually do a different kind of battle here, and that's actually refreshing. They seek resolution from, however, Melody after that wants restitution from Garaka for auctioning their deal and to save Phoebe. So Melody then helps activate Nadim's powers, and he's able to negate the gods finally. And it results in Phoebe holding him in place. Then Ray utilizes a straight containment unit to trap him. And then, of course, Melody finds that her actions have granted her what she wished. Melody then reconciles with Phoebe and then is finally able to join her family at peace in the afterlife. Then the whole frozen stuff in the city thaws. And then the whole public hails the Ghostbusters as heroes. Then Peck arrives to shut them down. But the public makes Peck support the team, and so he's basically forced to allow the Ghostbusters to continue their work against his own will. And so the Ghostbusters are delighted at this, and they begin his pursuit of the containment to escape ghosts across New York City right there, and that's where the film pretty much ends. So yeah, right there was that the OGs and newbies teaming up all together to stop Garaka right before he froze out New York. And the film even actually lets Ray Stantz actually be the one to help defeat the foe here. Then New York is freed from all that, and the Ghostbusters get to stay in business. Peck now pretty much no longer has the authority to shut them down because the citizens are now further on their side. And they even agree, without them, the whole city would have died. So Peck pretty much has no authority over them now much. He's now forced to support their whole work. You can tell Peck is pretending to cheer them on when in reality he's infuriated that they basically can't shut them down anymore. And now has to literally support them. But sadly though, Peck doesn't really get much of a comeuppance. Unlike in the first film. With my other bad qualities, Peter Venkman is back in this film, like I've mentioned. He hardly has anything to do for much of the movie. It is pretty much only for the middle and the finale. Once again, I do not buy Peck as the mayor, because he pretty much caused most of the problems at the end of the first film. After the first film, realistically, he would have probably been fired in real life, and probably should have never been allowed near any major political position in New York ever again, after what happened in the first movie. Even the animated series, The Real Ghostbusters, or I think it was, that series apparently established that he got fired from the EPA. Yeah, and in the first film, he did somewhat kind of get punished in the first film, where Stay Puft's burning remains splashed onto him, and that just clearly seems very painful by his reaction, and he was pretty much screaming out, "I hate you, Batman!" Yeah, because clearly he screamed it like that because the marshmallow remains splashed onto him clearly was very painful, because it was probably all very hot. But here, this movie, he gets zero comeuppance. Even though, he's once again the reason all of New York froze. Here. I give William credit for being brave to return to the role of Walter Peck. And, now, when it comes to the toxic fans who attacked William for playing this character, hating a character is normal, but giving the actor death threats for playing a hated character like Walter Peck was for sure not. Like, honestly, William did not deserve all the hate he got for playing this character. I did also mention some earlier nitpicks in this written review as well, but yeah. The reason why, like, I already mentioned both in this whole review is because, well, yeah, this is a mixed review. It has some good moments, and like, it's not great. It's passable time waster at best. And it's worth watching if you like. It is worth watching if you want something a little bit new that's not a rehash, but don't expect some kind of masterpiece. So yeah, as much as I hate the rehash bits of Afterlife, I would say I slightly prefer Afterlife, but this was a decent follow-up. I'm not sure if these like new characters are strong enough to continue this series, but if this series is going to continue, if this movie performs well at the box office, which it probably might not, because Ghostbusters isn't really that bankable of a franchise. In fact, like, I'm a little surprised Afterlife got... I'm a little surprised they even made a sequel to Afterlife. I mean, Afterlife wasn't even that successful at the box office either. Like, if this series... Like, they better have the right material to be able to continue this franchise and try going more like this. That's what I will have to say. So, in the end, guys... Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, it's a stream online for Ghostbusters fans that are hoping for more entertainment from this franchise and do want to see something new here. Anyways, guys, that's it for my review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. If we're going to rank Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you are tired of rehashes and want to see something new for once, you'll get that here, but I would just stream this one online for your own benefits because it does have weaker elements than Afterlife. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I'm going to give Ghostbusters Frozen Empire a 6.5 out of 10. There we go, guys. That wraps up my review for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, so now that that's done, I can finally do a Ghostbusters franchise ranking I still haven't done yet. I haven't done a Ghostbusters ranking video. I've done a Ghostbusters ranking comments, but not a video of the rankings. So yeah, I'll be doing that for the next video to rank all 5 of these movies. I think you know what will be bottom worst, and I think you guys all know what's going to be top best. So yeah, until then, guys, that'll be it for this mixed review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.